right? So I must tell you, my dear, he did a presentation on your behalf. Yes, he did. And guess what? What you think happened?
Well, I know he has a very extra special relationship with the land, something a little bit different from I do. So I guess he probably spoke about it from a ceremonial perspective. Am I right?
Well, when you see the recording, you can tell me. Me not tell her nothing more. You don't think me should I tell her? Somebody say, somebody say, she did teach him good. She did train him well. You did. So once you train him well, then he must talk about food because you are the food prof, don't it? So he must talk like about food. And so we are going to see if your presentation, if you just still have it, or if you just want to pep up the talk a little. You know, escape. Please sit down. Because me alone now sit down there. So. All right. So I'll be presenting. Anthony Richard, could you say something so we can hear if we're hearing you well? Auntie Fofie? Marcus? Dr. Goff? Anybody on the online platform? Can you say something? Anybody on the Zoom? Check in. Zoom. Check. Dr. Anthony Richard? Are you there? You're hearing us?
It's not coming through the speakers.
Say again, Dr. Anthony. Dr. Richards.
Hey, what's going on? You need help? You need help?
Fofie? Auntie
Yeah,
Fofie?
yeah. We're hearing you
Yes,
clear.
yes, we're hearing you. Talk again.
Okay.
All right, so let me hear if I hear Dr. Anthony.
Anthony Richards.
Don't think I'm forgetting somebody.
Hello.
Not
Anthony
because I
Richards
didn't
speaking.
mention. We're hearing you now. So, Dr. All right, Dr. Anthony is on. Jessel Wilson is on. And David Walters. Now, he's the executive director of Jamaica Conservation Development Trust and Wilborn Carr, Portland, and Action. No, Action and Free Winifred Beach Benevolent Society. Mr. Walters, I wish one of the boot you put on. Are the Clarks? The last time I see you, the shoes never so big. All right, so Mr. Walters, could you please come and sit here?
that genius.
Okay. So
Where did I get conned from?
going up now would be Dr. Anthony Richards, as you're on the Zoom for a long time. So we want to ensure that you get the chance to present. And he's going to present um, his piece, Maroon Territorial Boundary and Making Tradition in African Diaspora Context. Please get ready for Dr. Anthony Richards, and he's presenting via Zoom.
Howdy, everybody. Um, yeah, good man. Hey,
Greetings.
yeah, man. This here is a very sweet conference. Thank you very much for inviting me, right, or allowing me to participate. So let me see if I can see myself here. I think I'm looking in the wrong way. Yeah. Lights are dying. Okay. Right. Okay. So, boy, coming after that play, I don't know what I'm going to do to keep your interest. If I was there, I'd have two pieces of plant bush in my hand and I'd be able to tell you what I want to say, right? But I don't have bush in my hand, so I'm going to have to ask you to bear with me and look at some pretty pictures, okay? And this is my presentation here. Let me tell you first in words, and then you can see it in pictures. Okay, so the presentation is called Defense. And we're going to talk about some plants that Maroons have been using to mark their yards and mark their territory for a very long time. Not sure how long it started, but I'm going to present evidence that it may go all the way back to Africa. Okay? And then I'm going to ask what role do those traditions have today? Is it in the interest of Maroons to keep those traditions going? And now I'm going to need some pretty pictures. The first story I want to tell you is about an experience that Colonel Sterling of Moortown relayed to me. He said that long ago, when Maroons wanted to remember their boundaries, they would take a young person, select from the brighter children, 2 or 3, and take them to the boundary. And there they would plant a certain plant known as dragon blood, maybe other boundary plants, but dragon blood. And then they would make it so that the children remembered that day. Okay? And Colonel Sterling didn't experience that himself, but he told me about some elders who do remember it and who experienced it. So can I ask something? Can people see the screen and see the pictures that I'm going to put up next? Is it worth it?
You'll have to do your screen sharing, Dr. Richard.
Yeah, I'm going to screen share, right?
Yes.
Okay. But I just want to know that there's somebody out there. Okay.
Yes, Prof. We're here. We're here, Prof.
Yeah.
And we're able to see. Yes, we're able to see.
Mhm.
Yes, we're
Okay.
seeing your screen.
Right. So defense, right? We're talking about a fence line as well as defending our rights. And I want to show that something that we do as Jamaica Maroons, but also across is also relevant across the Caribbean and has a background in Africa and elsewhere. So here is this picture, which I don't like so much, but it represents the treaty being signed under a great big tree, which some people say is a cotton tree. And I just want to take my hat off to the Taino to remind everybody that a cotton tree is sacred to the Taino as well as sacred to the Africans. And so it was difficult for the colonial people to get Africans or the native people to cut down these trees. Here's one in Cuba, the ceiba. That's what they call it, la ceiba. And that is the Taino word. You see no other trees are around, right? Because of agriculture and so on, the other trees have managed to be taken away. Here in Tortola, the last man standing in this industrial site, it's a landfill. There's smoke behind there from the incinerator. You can see a grader, a backhoe over there. And this ceiba is the last tree standing, a cotton tree. You know, Jamaicans, Antiguan, cotton tree in the highway in Guyana. They had to run the highway on both sides of it. And there are all kinds of stories. People who tried to prune it, he's dead. Somebody tried to cut it down, he's dead. Somebody went with a backhoe, he's dead. All those stories help to preserve the reverence for the cotton tree, which for the First Nation people represented the cosmic tree, right? The branches represented 4 layers of the heavens, and the roots represent the 4 layers of the underworld. Here it is, right here in the cemetery, right across from that same highway in Guyana. So that's one of the trees that's still the landscape and means something to us and mark boundaries and cemeteries and so on. And here's another one. I mentioned earlier that a generation before, yes? Can you hear me? Yes. Father, I wonder why. Well, they're moving for me. That's the thing. I'm going to go out and start again. Thank you so much. Yeah, can you see? Can you? Yes, I'm going to do that. Oh, there is an immense lag because I've already moved on to something else. Yes, I was in slideshow, right? And nothing happened. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So can you see a PowerPoint now?
Yes, we're seeing the slide with the dragon blood. Yes, we're seeing the cotton tree.
Okay, good. All right, I'm going to stay in this mode, right? Because it's at least it's working.
Yes.
There's the old cotton tree in Cuba and Tortola and the industrial site. And here in the middle of the road in the highway, there's the Maikoni tree. Look it up on any newspaper in Guyana in the archives. You'll see stories about it. And the one across the road in the cemetery. And here is a poor child crying because it's been taken to plant dragon blood at the boundary of Maroon land. And then after he's planted it, to make him remember it, the elder Maroons have are still alive who experienced this. To my surprise, I found out that there is an ancient tradition in England called beating the bounds, where once a year, at a time called Rogation Tide, the priest from the Middle Ages till today could take you out to the boundaries, because there weren't that many good maps of the boundaries, and people would go out with their sticks and they would hit the stick against prominent marker trees and so on. And sometimes they reenact it today as an educational measure. And Rogation Tide is just finished. It was just before Whit Monday, Whitsuntide, so it's after Ascension Day. And here is a march in Britain, a protest march to save the marshes. And this is one of many protest marches in which people have used the old tradition to exert their rights. And so this pretty slide, which is an animation, asks, is it in the interest of Maroons to preserve this type of tradition and enforce it? Okay, so what validity does this tradition have, and what's its pedigree? I'm going to take you to my wife's country of Uganda, all the way in East Africa. East Africa doesn't have a lot to do with us, but I promise you, you will see that this tradition is found all over tropical Africa. When I say it's in Africa, I mean in Africa, right? Maybe not in the Sahara Desert, but certainly all over the tropics, from Uganda across to Cameroon, way down to Angola and Congo, way back across to Kenya and Tanzania, and over in Madagascar and even Ethiopia. Here you see what the Africans, the Ugandans, call Omula Mula. Mula Mula means the mediator or the peacemaker. And I took this photograph here earlier this year, showing Mula Mula being planted alongside one person's land, one person's farmland. And there are generally two types of trees that they use to do that. Two types of trees in this family. One of them is used mostly in marking fences. And that's the one I showed you before. And all these African countries, many African countries, somebody here, Mr. Sheridan, took the time to go through the literature and find any mention of that type of plant, a Dracaena plant, being used to mark fences. Now, he and I have been chatting and working together since about 10 years ago, and we've been able to expand this map quite a lot. And then there's another one, right, which tends to be used as a sacred symbol, as a symbol of the sacred. So here's the bigger one that tends to be used as a symbol of the sacred, and you'll see more of it. So on the left, you see the smaller, shaggy one that is used as a boundary mostly in Uganda. And again in Uganda, this is the royal coronation ground, the royal coronation ground of the Buganda kingdom. And here is where the king is taken to give his oaths and to have his sacred bath. And you see the bigger plant right here. It's this big one in their language is called elephant cane. And here is a shrine of the last emperor of the Uganda area. This is the person who fought the British, Emperor Kabalega. And you see them here outside his shrine. And next to a big sacred tree, a 500-year-old sacred tree. Here's some tourist people and worshippers at the sacred tree, and in other shrines. Popping across to our side of Africa in Cameroon, here are people visiting the palace, carrying bunches of a plant they call peace plant. Look in the man's hand. Look at those beautiful African fabrics. But down in his hand, between his fingers, is a peace plant. So way over in Uganda in the east and way over here, this plant is called the peacemaker. And actually Cameroon presented it to the United Nations on the Day of Peace, right? And here you see the story in both sides of Africa is that you're going to see somebody who you're making a petition to, you're angry with your neighbor, you send your son or daughter ahead of you, bearing the peace plan. 1960, and there's the king and queen in Cameroon, part of Cameroon, and here it is serving as a lightning protector. Up till today, the plant is called Rayo in Trinidad, meaning that it protects against lightning. Here is a procession, a masquerade, where everybody in the masquerades are carrying it. It's the sword of Falangang, right? Here's another masquerade holding it up under his chin. That yellow thing there, you can see in his hand, is the sword of Falangang. Running over to our ancestral home of Ghana, right? Here is a village, and I've marked out in yellow the places where our plant is planted. There's our plant on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, you see the physic nut, which some of you know as a boundary marking plant in Jamaica. I've photographed it in boundaries in Jamaica, and it's represented in blue, right? Here again in Ghana, this is the birthplace of the Okomfo, the Obiamano high priest, which helped to create the Ashanti state. Details in another presentation, I think. Here's a shrine in Ghana, right in the center of shrine. There's a sacred altar in there and medicinal plants. There it is. And here in front of the palace, the old palace, you have two of them over the lions. This is now a museum. And here it's at the boundary of two tribes in Ghana, right? That big one showing where one tribe's land ends and the other begins. A very old picture, and right here on the right, you see the tree. Its significance in this picture, I can't tell you. In Nigeria, here at this National Museum, which was also a palace, you see both the big green one and the red ones around. And here at a shrine to the thunder deity Ogun, there it is. And here at Oshun Osogba, many of you know the Orisha Oshun, the deity which represents love and sex and yellow and gold and wealth and cinnamon and spices and so on. And here the Yoruba artists have done a phenomenal job of preserving her shrine, and the tree is quite prominent. Here all the people who've come to the shrine on the shrine day, and it's once a year, and you can see that plant, they're surrounding that plant in front of the shrine. Yeah, so even in Brazil, we have versions of the plant being used. Here's an awo, an acolyte, on the one side here, holding it in his hand. And here's a spiritual Baptist altar in Trinidad, Shango altar, and a spiritual Baptist meeting celebrating Spiritual Baptist Liberation Day. And they have very much in common with revival. I know a lot of Jamaicans associate this plant with revival, and what I'm saying is that this thing is deep and wide, from Africa, the whole of tropical Africa, to much of the Caribbean, right? Here near Piako Airport, I had a moment while I was catching a plane, so I went out to have a look, and there it was, all over the cemetery, one or two on each grave. And here, near Vigi Cemetery in St. Lucia, look at it. That's the sea in the background, and all on the sand, all of these graves are being marked by the red version. Shrines in Trinidad. Oh, this is a shrine I used to go to, and this is lion next to a couple of the sacred plants. The one hanging over him, he's holding for me, is near the gate. And here you see a Maroon village in Suriname, where you have that sort of curtain to keep the evil spirits out as you walk through. You want to along with the shield at the entrance of the village. Okay, so a few comparisons. The picture I took in Suriname showing the red one all over the Catholic ceremony in Suriname, and a Catholic cemetery in Cameroon is on the other side. And I just want to hark back to the Emperor's Shrine in Uganda. And these are African American graves on the left-hand side. Now, this plant does not grow, our plant does not grow, our tropical plant, in the cold. And African Americans have found plants to substitute, it seems to me, right? This is the yucca plant, not yucca of our Taino cassava, but yucca, Spanish bayonet. And I've seen this type of plant with the spine on the tip of the leaf planted in hedges together with the dragon's blood plant in Jamaica, from Kingston all the way up to Motown. Everywhere that I've seen some of it. So the take-home message is that it's not a buck-up. Our traditions have broad and ancient pedigrees. We have one foot in a European tradition of beating the bones, and another foot in the African traditions. Hang on. And to take a leaf from what Devon Patton said, it's important to know the boundaries of our territory and remind ourselves of them all the time. In the earliest maps of Charlestown, Charlestown was just a dot. And this information was presented about 5 years ago at the Charlestown Maroon Conference by my dear sister, Dr. Tara Edwards at UWI. And then she's at the map unit as well, so she went on to show how maps later had boundary marks on them, and so on. But defined territory seems to be part of that definition if you guys intend to go down that road. And another thing is that the English tradition is admissible in court. A participation, if you say, I know the boundaries because I participated in the rogation when I was a child, right? It has been admitted in court in the past as evidence of a boundary. And the tree itself, the plant, is often shown on cadastral maps. I've seen them from Trinidad and St. Vincent, marking the corner of pieces of land. Marking the corners of pieces of land. Government might put down a piece of steel, but when you take your mother to see that piece of land, she's going to plant a type of tree. There are other trees like calabash trees and so on, but today we're just focusing on this particular one. And as Mama G said, we need to know where these sacred spaces are. People come back and visit them, right? So thank you very much for your time, right? A lot of people helped with putting together this, including Maroon elders. I spoke to colonels of Colonel Douglas, Colonel Sterling, right? I also spoke to other people who live among you and work among you. I had great encouragement from Nana Fofier, right? So thank you very much for your time. An email address is at the bottom there. Oh, can I just say one last thing? That somebody earlier was talking about looking at our past spiritual traditions to push forward to the future. And that was my sister, Dr. Chenzira Kauna, right? And I'm going to take a leaf from that book. Thank you very much, sister. That's all. Stop screen sharing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anthony. And I know you'll probably say, don't call me doctor, call me Anthony. But in this field that you are an incredible expert in, round of applause for that riveting presentation. And so I would also like to ask, do we have any questions, whether online or in person? Let me check.
I think my mic is still on, and I see a hand from Marcus Goff.
Oh. Welcome, Dr. Goff.
Hi, hi. I was just congratulating really Dr. Richards. Lovely presentation, sir. Really love the connection with today and the Western Africa and the plans and the land. Really lovely. Thank you so much.
I'm really glad that you made it on time. Right, thank you.
Yes. I mean, some of the stories that you've shared also tied in the relationship, not just amongst us as humans, but the lands, the indigenous lands that we are from. One of those was when you spoke towards, I think, the dragon's blood plant that is used as boundary. Now, I grew up seeing that plant everywhere, not understanding the significance of it. And so for me, this presentation really, again, ground the oral stories that is important to us when it comes to the land and our relationship to it. And I mean, this story is coming all across from the African continent. And I also wanted to point out that someone once shared with me that when the enslaved Africans came across, there was a deep loss of connection to their lands. And so when they're here on Jamaica's land, there was a sense of, how should I put it? They weren't connected to it. And for me, I thought maybe you need a different perspective because the land welcomed you. The first peoples welcomed you and shared the knowledge. And in that shared knowledge, just that small space, you could see the relationship that between the plants, between the challenges, between the struggles, between the freedom and the liberty. And so I'd love for us to take that home and really just sort of um, gathering space if until I see if there's any questions online, but I'm not seeing any online and I'm not having any in person, right? Everybody was satisfied with that wholesome delivery. Perfect. Thank you so much again, Dr. Anthony. It was very, very lovely of you to come and share that. And I know next year, I know you are going to be in Charlestown. And we look forward to welcoming you. You're going to be a different part of Portland now. Not Port Antonio, which I know you have been before, but we want to see you in Buff Bay. So we're going to move on to the next presentation that is Joshelle Wilson of Environmental Action Group. Joshelle, are you prepared? Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
perfect. Please go ahead.
Fantastic. I'm gonna share my screen, so that would be fantastic. So you guys can see. Just a little bit of introduction. I think my presentation is going to be way different from everyone else's today. You guys more talked about indigenous people and everything like that, which is all about culture. I'm going to just touch on those very slightly, right? Because I'm going to be giving you more of a environmental protection approach than anything, right? And how just protecting one species can lead to the protection of many other species and even plants reclaiming your culture and your heritage, because species are part of your culture and heritage, especially endemic species. So I'm going to be talking about the Antiguan racer, which is only found on the island of Antigua and Barbuda, right? And I'll go more into detail of that. So just to start off, sorry. So to start off is talking about who I'm representing today. So we are called the Environmental Awareness Group. Sorry about the Environmental Action Group. I forgot to say that was a typo. So it's Environmental Awareness Group, also known as EAG. We're Antigua and Barbuda's oldest NGO, nonprofit organization here in Antigua and Barbuda, and we've been doing work for over 30 years. Our tagline is for the benefit of people and wildlife. So we aim to make sure that we have a society where everyone cares for and values our environment, all our ecosystems and all our wildlife, but also promoting that the aspect of people need to be part of that protection as well. So that's why our work that we're doing has to be interesting with a hint of adventure. So the Environmental Awareness Group consists of 3 different programs, right? All for environmental protection, right? One of those programs that I'm under all 3 programs, but the one I work closely with is called OICP, which is the Offshore Islands Conservation Program, right? So just moving on to that. So the Offshore Islands Conservation Program is a partnership between both government and non-governmental organizations, both regional organizations and international organizations. And those include like fisheries, Department of Environment, Ministry of Tourism, National Parks Authority, which is works on with our UNESCO World Heritage Site, and Fauna and Flora right now, which is one of our leading partners for the Antiguan racer. So just a little bit of information. OICP, it was formed in 1995, right? It was also known as the Antigua Racer Conservation Project, right? It saved the Antiguan racer from the brink of extinction. We do this our main focus is eradication of invasive species on islands and making sure that these islands are invasive species free. So all the species on those islands can either grow, right, in a normal state without any predators on them, right? And we believe that this should also be incorporated with wildlife monitoring, environmental education, and community engagement. And I'll jump into that a little bit more because we do where we work at the moment, which is the Northeast Marine Management Area, right, is one of our largest protected areas, right, is made up of both land and sea, right? And within that line over there, where you can see within that boundary, it's actually made up of different people and different communities. So those people actually interact, and I'll zoom in just a little bit closer for you. Those people actually interact with those offshore islands. So they depend on those offshore islands to make money. They depend on them to provide them with food. They also depend on the oceans around them to be sustainable with fisheries, right? For the fisheries industry, it's a big part of the fishing culture for these communities. So protecting this area is one of our main focuses for the Offshore Island Conservation Program, or OICP. And as you can see with just the information there, it's a huge body of space, and it takes up 12% of Antigua's population. So just moving on, why is the offshore islands important, right? So it's recognized as an important bird and biodiversity area. We do our regular bird surveys every 2 years, right, biannual. Every 2 years, we do our regular bird surveys where we make sure we monitor these islands. These islands are islands that we have eradicated rats from, or any type of invasive species, invasive mammalian species, so rats and mongoose, mouse, that kind of thing. It's also key biodiversity areas. So within those islands are little different types of ecosystems that house different types of animals, right? So that's one of the main important things. And also it's the number one top tourist attraction within Antigua and Barbuda. Every single Antigua and Barbuda is made up of a lot of tour boats right now, and a lot of these tour boats visit these islands on a regular basis. And also, as I mentioned before, they're the livelihoods of many people, as you can see within the protected area boundary. So our offshore islands is made up of 51 different islands, right? This includes Great Bird Island, Green Island, Prickly Pear Island, and one of the big islands, which is Jumbie Bay, right? And they do some of the turtle work here on the Hawksbill sea turtle. They do one of the largest in the Western Hemisphere for Hawksbill sea turtles, and that can range from the different sizes range from 0.1 all the way up to 184 hectares for these islands. It's privately and state owned, so meaning that some of these islands are privately owned, right, and some of it does belong to government, and it's kind of like a give and take in some ways when trying to access these islands. But beaches are freely accessible for everyone. Now, so I've talked about what the offshore islands is, and we have different programs or different core activities that we do under OICP or within EAG itself. One of those programs with the invasive species management, right? So this is all invasive species that is either enter in the offshore islands or is on the offshore islands, and we may ensure that these invasive species are eradicated off these islands. So one of our main works is that eradication of species to ensure that the natural life or wildlife that's on the island, whether it be species or whether it be plants, actually get to survive, and you keep that type of heritage. So I'll kind of jump into a little bit of history here. And if I'm talking too fast for some of these. First of all, in the 1800s to Antigua, and as you can see the slideshow here, if you can see that, right? They were first introduced in the 1800s. So during the colonial times, there were different types of species here. Antiguan racers were prominent all over the island. We had Antigua had a parrot. They also had a whiptail, and they also had burrowing. Caused these species to actually decline, right? And these actually caused for more on Antigua from the 1800s. So with the introduction of rats, the colonists at the time, or the British at the time, when they had colonized Antigua and they brought over the rats, one of the main things that Antigua was known for was for sugarcane. I think they were the #1 within the Caribbean to produce sugarcane, right? And one of the things that they did was learning from India, right, and how to control rats, the black rat. And one of the things they actually introduced was the mongoose, right? The small Indian mongoose. And the introduction of the small Indian mongoose was actually as a control for the black rats. But apparently that within India is way different, that the mongoose and the black rat usually meet up because rats are like prominent within India, so they would usually meet up. However, here, in the Caribbean, when they had brought over the mongoose are usually active during the day and not the night, and rats are mainly active during the night. So this plan kind of backfired on them, that the mongoose and the rats were not meeting up. So what happened is that the rats would destroy and kill every little living species during the day, while the mongoose will do the rats will do it in the night, and the mongoose will do it in the day. So it was kind of like a really pressurized system happening, where these two predators or invasive species were pressuring the local and endemic, causing their population to drop. And one of those populations that actually dropped at the time was the Antiguan racer, which was rediscovered on one of the offshore islands and not actually on mainland. We do have some specimens from the mainland from since 1995. Some of these specimens were brought to the Zoological Society in the UK, and if you ever get to go to the UK, you can see some of those specimens there. So our efforts actually started 29 years ago with our conservation of the Antiguan racer. So that's a little bit of history there for some people about that. So we kind of push for the protection of the racer and we're trying to bring its numbers from the low numbers that it was on the island and trying to bring it higher. And I'll get more into that just a little bit more. So invasive species are not very nice. They're never good for islands. They're never good for the country. They're never good for people in general. And one of the things that was happening is how especially the black rats, they were impacting not only the Antiguan racer snake, but they're also impacting other endemic species like the Antigua ground dragon, the Redonda ground dragon, mass boobies and brown boobies, those types of things. So what the rats would do, they'll actually prey on these defenseless animals, right? And they would actually eat the soft parts of them, either the skull or the stomach. And for the snake, it used to be its tail, right, which is where most of his reproductive system is found. So some of the species, some of the snakes that we've actually caught over the past few years have actually had missing tails, like large portions of their tails missing. So that's one of the things that rats were doing to the ecosystem, and that's one of the reasons why we continue to do our work. So this is just a side-by-side representation of how in removing invasive species from an island actually benefits that island, right? Not only the species itself, but also the growth of plants, right? And as you can see, the quality and quantity and diverse vegetation has improved since from this picture on your right, which is from 1995, and then the other recent picture from 2021, you can see that huge difference after that island has stayed completely invasive species free. And one of the things we use for this to make sure that our work is going having a positive impact is actually using fixed point photos, so taking pictures over time at the same spot. So now that I've talked about the invasive species aspect, I'm going to jump into more of a species description. So actually jumping into the actual species that actually caused us to actually make strides within conservation and protection of the offshore islands and also of the species, which is the Antiguan racer, and which is one of the core activities I lead at the moment, which is the Antiguan racer management, right? So I'll just give you a really in-depth description of this lovely snake, right? And then I'll just let you know how, like, the invasive species aspect has affected the Antiguan racer over time. So just a little bit of introduction about the snake. It's on the IUCN Red List as critically endangered, right? It is endemic to the Antigua and Barbuda Bank, right? It's found nowhere else in the world. It's currently found on 4 different offshore islands, right? It used to occur within Antigua and the whole of Antigua and Barbuda. However, in Antigua itself, is everyone hearing me? Just making double check. I'm hearing. Okay, fantastic. So within Antigua itself, the main cause of the Antiguan racer being its population dying out on mainland Antigua was because of invasive species. Barbuda, however, does not have that invasive species, right? So it doesn't have mongoose. It has rats, but it doesn't have a full-blown population as Antigua had back in the day. So we don't understand that concept. We only have fossil records of the Antigua racer being on Barbuda, but we have no idea why the population is no longer there. Could be because of black rats, could be because their population is being pushed somewhere else. Don't know. So this is just a map of all 4 islands where the Antiguan racer can be found. And just to give you an idea of how small these some of these islands are, right? 3 of the 4 islands are pretty small and could only hold a certain amount of racers on them, right? The biggest island we have, which is Green Island, is 45.2 hectares. And within that island alone, we should be able to find or catch or see at least 800 different types of races, or between 500 to 600 if you want to be so close to it. But within these 4 islands, we estimate that these 4 islands alone should carry a maximum of 1,200 races. So just going into a little bit of sexual dimorphism, just saying the difference between males and females. So males are different coloration than females. Males are much smaller. They're dark brown. Sometimes they're dark, like blackish in color, right? So they have a darker color than females, while females are lighter. When they're younger, there's more grayish opaque, right? Some of them are pretty nice to see, and you'll see different pictures just going forward, right? We'll talk about when females get bigger because they tend to differentiate themselves different and have a different coloration growing out. So this is just a picture, again, of a male and a female side by side, just showing you the differences between both of them. So the male on top, you'll see the male, darker color, the female, much lighter color. This is another picture of males and females. So on your right, you'll see that the male is darker. On your left, you see the female is more brown. So you can see that females kind of go through a different set of coloration throughout their younger points in life. And then we'll jump into when they get older. So when these races start to get older, especially the females, they tend to differentiate themselves, right, into different categories, whether it be because of genetics or because of environmental differentiation or environmental conditions. They tend to differentiate themselves into this reddish color, this kind of marble whitish color, and then this darker part of the darker color, right? They could also be this lighter coloration as well, a different color, which is more of a marble going into brownish color, and then you could actually see them going into a full brown color when they get older. And these are all when they at the age of at least these races tend to live between 10 to 12 years, right? Or sometimes 10 to 15 max, right? Depending on environmental conditions being favorable for them, right? And these snakes would actually start to go through this coloration at the age of 7 or 8 years, right? So when they grow up, when they pass that stage, when they turn to become adults, they tend to go through this coloration and differentiate themselves based on where they spend most of the time. And we'll get into habitat just now, but just to show you a few pictures of males. So this is a full-grown adult male, right? This was during, I think, 2008. All right, this was the first 2 adult males that were translocated to one of our islands over the years. And then this is just another color just to show you how males could be that really dark color on top and then the kind of brownish color below. So they kind of differentiate themselves between these 2 colors. And this is one of the things that researchers were doing more research on and why that is so. So behavior of these snakes, and again, I'm really sorry that this is more of the species based than more anything, but the species is pretty much active during the day, right? But there have been some recordings of them at night. They tend to be active during the hotter hours for some odd reason, especially females, right? Males tend to be more shy and tend to stick to the shaded areas. They're very active, right? And they're pretty much docile animals. They tend to calm down very quickly. They're not too extreme with their behavior, and they tend to want to escape you more easier than try to be around humans as much. Their habitat would include every single part of the offshore islands. These snakes are not shy to any part of the island, right, or any parts of different habitats. So it could be rockier edges, it could be leaf, it could be the forest, it could be the hot sands, right? These snakes would tend to go anywhere that they can, especially the females, right? They are arboreal. That means they tend to burrow themselves into little hidey holes and whatnot. So some of the time you may be passing next to one of their homes and you'll never know. And most of the times when they try to escape, they try to go down into hidey holes. So that's one of the things that they do, right? Their behavior, they're ambush predators, they lie in wait, they strike, they swallow their prey whole, right? They're non-venomous, right? So these snakes are non-venomous. So actually working with these snakes is pretty nice and pretty easy to handle, right? And they tend to want to, as I said, they tend to try to escape their predators and humans pretty easily. Pretty quickly, sorry. Their diet includes 2 endemic species of lizards that is found here in Antigua and Barbuda, which is the Watsonol and the Antigua ground lizard, right? Some of the other species that they include would be another endemic species of geckos that is also found in Antigua and Barbuda, right? And sometimes the West Indian whistling frog, right, would be one of their prey species. So we're trying to ensure that we monitor not only the snakes, but also their prey. So that kind of leads to our management decisions on how we can protect the environment as best as we can, right? And ensuring that there's not too much of one or too less of one species available for these racers and also for the island. Because there could be fluctuations between populations of lizards and populations of snakes. So these snakes have a very interesting defense mechanism. They tend to release a musk, right? And this musk is a kind of like a hormonal spray that they will release from their cloaca, right? And this will deter smaller predators, not a human, right? The smell is pretty bad, but usually it kind of you can wash it out over time. But they tend to spin themselves around sometimes when you have them, and they tend to try to bite, which is a very rare occasion. That has not happened to me, but it has happened to people who have handled these snakes. Usually, when snakes are pregnant or grafting, they tend to be a little bit more aggressive. That I have not seen that yet within within the pregnant females that I have handled, but apparently some people have experienced bites from these snakes. Another thing, just to remember, again, they're non-venomous, right? Their camouflage is really, really good, right? And this is why I put one of these photos here, and I'll move on to another one. If you could spot the racers within this, you're pretty good, right? But it's really hard for you to spot one, and that's why our work is very important, right? Ensuring that we identify all these species here on the island. So, just moving on to the last bit of information about these snakes, which is more of their breeding biology, right? A lot is not known about these snakes because not a lot of research is being done. All we know about their breeding biology is from what we know from other similar species and from what we got from captive breeding, because there was a captive breeding program was started from 1995 until 2002. As you can see, the captive breeding program had ended because these snakes were breeding perfectly within the wild, but apparently for some odd reason they were just suddenly would just die for no reason, and there was no explanation behind it. Some of the things that they do is that they take longer, their eggs take longer to hatch, right? So incubation period is pretty long. So it's kind of hard for someone to be constantly, months after months, look to go through the body chain from being really plump when they give birth and then staying there, not leaving, not going out too much. It would seem to and leaving their egg and coming back to it. So that's one of the things, and that's why captive breeding had ended in 2002. So we've talked about all these things, right? We've talked about how removed species have actually benefited these islands and caused them to go back to how they were, right? And this is one of the things that we do, which is by every 5 weeks we do invasive species monitoring, where we monitor all these islands, not only the 4 islands where the Antiguan racer is found, but another 8 offshore islands, right? And these offshore islands, we make sure they're mammalian invasive species free, free of rats, mongoose, and mouse, right? So every 5 weeks we do those checks. Within the 4 islands of the Antiguan racer, we have 130 permanent bait stations. So on your right, as you can see, the person who's cleaning up that station, that's a permanent bait station. And within those permanent bait stations are little poison blocks that only affect mammals, right? Does not affect invertebrates, right, or any other species or birds or anything like that. And within that bait box, we put 4 or 6 different types of bait. And for rats, it attracts rats pretty easily, and mouses. For mongoose, it's different, where we do a live trapping, which is different. And one of the things I would like to mention is, as you saw in the map, Green Island is one of our largest island that houses the racers. And just to someone saying something, sorry. Oh. Oh, sorry. So within Green Island, it's been reinvaded 4 times, right? Since we started our work and since the races were translocated to that island, they've been reinvaded 4 times. So one of the things that's happening right now is that they have a restaurant on the island. So we try to monitor it just a little bit more, because that could be a attractant for invasive species such as rats and mouse. So we try to go to that island just a little bit more than the rest. Because the house is one of the largest populations. So just to give you an idea of that, here's just a population maps of all 4 islands. And if you could see, between 2018 and 2021, there has been a significant drop in our population. It has gone from close to 1,200 individuals, and you can see that steep drop. And as you can see, that orange line is just a total, but that green line below there, right, is actually for Green Island, which houses our largest population. So because there was a reinvasion, which happened in 2017, between 2017 and 2018, no invasive species monitoring work was being done between 2018 until 2021, where we had an eradication, a full-blown eradication, spending 2.5 months on the island, ensuring that every single rat or any mouse that was on the island was eradicated and making sure that the racer population could bounce back. So this is just an example of how these invasive species can affect your natural ecosystem. And this is just another graph just showing how the total population had dropped within those times, just showing you because Green Island houses some of the largest number of races, their population, once their population is being affected, it drops the number of individuals that are present in the wild. And that's one of our hugest problems at the moment, is ensuring that these islands remain invasive species free. However, we have ensured, this is just a map of the permanent bait stations. We have increased the amount of permanent bait stations that are on Green Island to ensure that no rats survive, to ensure that Green Island is pristine, to ensure that the vegetation continues to grow, and ensure that the population of Antiguan racer and other species within that island actually continue to increase. And we have been seeing an increase. After 2021, after the eradication was over and we had eradicated the island of get rid of all the rats on the island. The actual tail end of this island, where you see on your all the way to your right, had no birds at the time. But in 2022, when we had revisited the island during our seabird census, we actually saw a boom in sooty terns returning to the island during that time. So that's just an example of how removing invasive species have actually caused populations to return and populations to grow. So wildlife monitoring is one of the main aspects that we're doing. So monitoring the snake, ensuring that each snake that we capture is monitored, their morphology is taken, meaning their size, their head size, their length, everything. Sexing them is one of the major things to ensure that climate change or even the ratio between islands is not skewed and is actually balanced off, or at least more females to male ratio. If it's too much females and not enough males, we need to introduce some of the different genders within that population. So this is just the type of work that we do, ensuring each snake gets a very, very small identification tag, right? It's called a pit tag, a passive integrated transponder, right? And within that pit tag they each get a number, which goes into a database that we could also monitor over time. And I monitor this system over time, ensuring that we take different measurements every year, every 2 years, to ensure that these snakes are growing, monitoring their health, all these types of things. We also take a picture of each racer that we catch, just so we have in our database that we could use some of that information. One of the things that I'm doing now is actually trying to write a publication for the different types of coloration that you see, and also the different sizes, right? A lot of things conservation-wise has been done for the Antiguan racer, but not a lot of things on the snake itself, like identifying how big they would grow. What's the age that a juvenile should be? What's the age that an adult should be? That kind of thing. I'm trying my best to actually collect as much information to use in our decision-making processes, right, for more conservation protection. So protect the snakes and also protect the offshore islands. One of the biggest things that I want to include here, it would be the work. This work is never possible alone by an NGO. It's always good to have the backing from the government, especially departments of environment. And our Department of Environment have actually put the Antiguan racer within their Environmental Protection and Management Act, right? And one of the big things about it is that no one could kill, injure, have in their possession, right, or anything like that, or cannot have the snake at any time if you are not given a permit by the Department of Environment or given the say-so by the Environmental Awareness Group. If you do have a snake in your possession, you would be fined or you will face possible jail time. So I think this is it for me. I thank you guys for listening. I thank you guys for having me here. Right, it was really lovely to hear all these different types of stories and different types of presentations from you guys. And if you have any questions, I'm free to take them.
Thank you very much, Joshelle, for a very riveting presentation on the work that you guys are doing. I'll soon open up the floor to questions from those online and those here. But I guess I can start off the questions with a few. In Jamaica, there is some work that has been done that is very dear to the Taino community with the preservation of our local iguana. And the iguana, like the Taino people, were thought of to be extinct in Jamaica until in this century, the 90s, that someone that was hunting for pigs had found the iguana, and there's been work done. So you guys in Antigua are way ahead of us in terms of this preservation work. We are still doing the captive breeding and releasing. And what I found interesting in your presentation is the next step. I don't know if it is in the plans, but it's something that I can definitely discuss with our contacts that we have at the Hope Zoo Foundation about habitat restoration. Because it's one thing to grow and release, but what are you releasing them to? You
Yeah.
know? To be flooding areas with these endemic iguanas, and then we still may have mongoose and other things that are consuming the young. So I took that from your presentation, and comparing again between Jamaica and Antigua, the next question I'd have for you is, what is the sensitization work like? What is, well, first of all, let me not assume. What is the atmosphere around investing in protecting reptiles, especially snakes, from the common society in Antigua? I can give you a tip. In Jamaica, it wouldn't get that much favor initially, but I don't know if Antigua is the same. Are there a lot of snake lovers in Antigua? Is that a common thing?
So sadly, there's not a lot of snake lovers in Antigua. Antigua is a very religious place, and a lot of them tend to associate the snake to the Bible, right? And one of the things, this is why we had that environmental protect, like get the snake within the Environmental Protection and Management Act, is to ensure that people are not harming the snake in any way, because the population is already low. It could only be found on 4 different offshore islands. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to have that. One of the things we're doing, which started in the early 2000s, right, way before me, right, was something called a floating classroom initiative, where the people who were within who started the preservation of the Antiguan racer itself were taking young kids, right, and adults, right, on a boat to the island itself, showing them the Antiguan racer, even taking some of the an Antiguan racer and bringing it back to mainland and bring it on TV, which we still do till this day. I still do that till this day, bringing the racer to the island, showing the kids. Some kids are fearful, some adults are fearful, right? We try to make them just gently just touch or just be around in the presence of the snake as much as possible. We try to tell people, we try to educate them as best as possible that these snakes are harmless, right? They're not here to harm you, right? They're just here to just exist and just do what they normally do. But we're trying our best right now. We do a lot of educational outreach, not only for the snakes, but also for the different species that the snake would actually interact with on our offshore islands. We've even written educational material, right, for the schools itself, and we've targeted them and showing that they learn about the offshore islands and the species that are on the offshore islands. So it's a lot of educational outreach. Educational outreach is one of the main things EAG is trying to do at this moment.
Thank you very much for sharing on that. That mimics some of the work that is taking place. I know Hope Zoo Foundation has this whole book that has information, puzzles, the areas they can color to really try and engage. Because there's, as you said, I didn't pinpoint it to religion, but I'm glad you said it. That there's this fear of reptiles, and the iguanas are not venomous, don't hurt anyone, and there's that fear here. So I appreciate that work that is being doing, and I'll definitely encourage some connection between your organization and those here, because there are more opportunities for collaboration and working towards, preserving these species. So I thank you for that. Are there any questions on the ground here? And I'll check on Zoom. All right. Anthony can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for an excellent presentation. I love the picture of the vegetation. I think you came on to tell us how protecting one species would help the rest. And you mentioned vegetation and some of the birds. What's the, has there been sort of an impact from hurricane? Oh, by the way, I love this slide of the crash. Yeah, it's the best. That's really educational slide. I'd love to get hold of some of the data just to replot it. Or even just to suggest you plot it on an exponential scale, right? That would be interesting, right? Log graph paper. Anyway, yeah. What's the question again? What about Redonda and hurricane on Great Bird Island and so on?
So one of the things that has happened over the year, because we have, I think the last major hurricane Antigua had experienced was Irma, but that wasn't really too bad for you guys because I think it hit Barbuda worse than it did Antigua. One of the things we do after any major event, either it's a party on the offshore islands or any type of weekend that that spans within that weekend where people go to the offshore islands, or if there's a hurricane, the day after, or probably 2 days after, we try to go out there to monitor what's going to happen, right? Whether or not it brings in invasive species from the offshore island, or if it causes any destruction of our bait stations or anything like that. So one of the things that we do is actually go to assess the situation as best as we can. That's for the offshore islands. For Redonda, it's a little bit different because Redonda is so far away. It's closer to Montserrat and St. Kitts than it is to Antigua. We haven't seen any significant damage from hurricanes for Redonda. Some of the historical artifacts and historical buildings that are still there, they're still up, right? Some of it is just being, because of time, some of it is being worn out. But for hurricanes at this time, we haven't seen a problem. However, it is we have predicted that the offshore islands probably in the next, let's say 20 years or next 10 to 15 years, we'll say 20 or 30 years, they would be underwater due to climate change, because these offshore islands are pretty much just about below sea level. It's kind of hard to, we had to predict that we're going to lose some of our land within the next few years. But we have not seen a significant impact as yet for hurricanes, but on the island. But we have seen the impacts of what it could bring with invasive species.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you guys again for having me. It was a pleasure.
We thank you. We thank you. We really do appreciate the work that you're doing, and there are a lot of parallels. I know in your introduction you were saying, you're not really touching on the indigenous stuff, but you are. The language may change. You may say invasive, we will say invaders. You may talk towards, the concept of habitat restoration. We will talk about rematriation, giving back to the earth. You may talk about, the reintroduction of the species back to the species, and we'll talk about repatriation, returning what should be there, or movement of people back to these spaces. So all of these things are tied together. And, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to learn from you and your sharing. So thank you again, Joshua. All right, everyone. We move on to our next presenter. Now, our next presenter is the Executive Director of the Jamaica Conservation and Development Trust. And from observing his real passion for conservation, I saw that he was really enthused by the work that was being done and shared by Joshelle. So giving an opportunity to share some of the activities that are taking place here with the topic of community awareness of the threat to public spaces. And this is around the Portland Environment Action and Free Winifred Beach Benevolent Society. I introduce David Walters, the Executive Director of JCDT, and we have on the program also Wilbur Carr. So thank you, David.
Thank you so much for having me. Just a slight correction to the program. We're doing a slightly different topic. We're talking about conserving nature and culture within Jamaica's only World Heritage Site, the Blue and Jonker Mountains National Park. I don't have the other person listed on the program with me here today, so it'll just be me from the JCDT. All right, so greetings, everybody. Thanks for having me. I've been enjoying the presentation so far. Dr. Richards, I enjoyed learning about the boundary marking activities with the plants. I am presenting also a conservation angle. And in our conservation work, we use plants to mark the boundaries of the national park as well. So that's really important. Joshelle, good to see you again. And Josh is doing really, really important work in Antigua and Barbuda and the EAG group. Really, really important work. I was really excited to see his presentation. So I'm also a conservationist like Joshelle, and I'm presenting a conservation angle. But what's important to note is that there are a lot of parallels, there's a lot of overlaps between nature and culture. Many people seem to think of them as separate, but they are very inextricably linked. One thing I pride myself in doing is that whenever I get the opportunity, I'll tell people that the Maroon peoples are the first conservationists in Jamaica. They were the first ones protecting the land, protecting their people, protecting their natural spaces. And this is even why we have recognized it as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. All right, so we're jumping into it, right? Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. Thank you to the Maroon peoples. Thank you for your important work, even today, in conservation. So we're looking at Jamaica's only World Heritage Site and National Park. And I want to give you a little bit of context. What you're looking at here is the eastern end of the island, the eastern 4 parishes. And what you'll see is some colored areas, and I'll go through and explain. On the outer boundary, in that blue area, is what we call our community buffer zone. This is a 2-kilometer buffer from the national park boundary. Within this area is where you find a lot of the communities that neighbor the national park. You'll find Charlestown here, Moortown, all of these communities within the Rio Grande Valley, and even in St. Thomas and so on. The other boundary where the light green is, that is the national park. And the national park was designated in 1993 under the Natural Resources Conservation Authority Act. It's a protected space of the highest order. On the inside now, that darker green is our core conservation area, and it's actually the UNESCO World Heritage Site. And this space is really important because it is one of very few sites that is what's known as a mixed site. Typically what happens is that a site is inscribed for either natural or cultural heritage, but this one is said to have outstanding universal value for both culture and nature. Anybody can tell us why those two things are important in the context of World Heritage? Any guesses? The question is, why is it that UNESCO thought it important to inscribe the space for nature as well as culture? Yeah? Because, right, exactly, because they are intertwined. The two things are intertwined. So thanks for that answer. So how the two things are intertwined is that the Maroon people use this space, the natural features of the mountains and the landscape. This was their refuge. This was their home as they fought against the colonial people at the time. And it was very important to the story of the Maroons, even to present day. So that's why it has a rich cultural history and it has outstanding universal value for nature as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about the management agency that I represent, and this is the agency that manages the space. And we're really just a conduit or one of several partners who work to preserve the fauna and flora within the space. So the JCDT was founded in 1988. We're a nonprofit, And we have a co-management agreement with the government of Jamaica through NEPA, that's the National Environmental and Planning Agency. What that allows us to do is carry out management activities in terms of protecting the space itself. As I said before, it's a national park. We have a small organization doing a number of things, but we operate under 7 main programmatic areas. Those include enforcement and compliance, monitoring and evaluation, education and outreach, recreation and tourism, conservation of natural heritage, preservation of cultural heritage, and governance and administration. I just want to introduce you to some of the highlights of activities that we do. Just a quick overview of what's happening in some of these program areas and how it's relevant to the protection of culture and nature. So we have a core of national park rangers here at JCDT, and these are people who are legally designated as officers to respond to environmental breaches and carry out management activities in the space. So on this left-hand side here, you have a photo of our national park ranger confiscating something that's in a cage here. And he can't see the photo properly, so I'll just tell you what's in the cage. This is a Jamaican coney. This is our only, endemic land mammal, and we confiscated this from a local farmer who, hunted it and was about to carry it home for dinner, and we were able to rescue this one. So these are a lot of the activities that we do within the space. We do a lot of observation and environmental monitoring. The rangers are our eyes and ears on the ground. So what they're doing is making notes of the environmental observations. They're recording different kinds of breaches. They are telling us what's happening with the trees and the animals and the birds and everything. And they're collecting that information using a number of different tools. We are analyzing, reporting, trying to understand the frequency of these kinds of events for strategic management. So we're trying to collect as much data as possible so that we can understand what are the best routes to take, what are the best strategies to employ in order to take corrective action and to reduce the threats to the environment. So just some visuals in terms of some of the tools and things that they're using in their work. And I'm going to move on just to talk a little bit about natural heritage conservation. Now, when we talk about natural heritage conservation, we're looking at the habitat and the space. And the main goal of this area is to maintain and enhance the remaining area of closed and disturbed broadleaf forest and to protect the plant and animal species that exist within the space. Now, while the enforcement part of it has to do with writing up warnings to people and encouraging compliance and so on and so forth, this program area has a lot to do with ecosystem restoration. So a lot of it is tree planting, invasive clearing. Most times we're talking about invasive plants. So you can see here some rangers doing some monitoring activities of trees that were recently planted. They're doing bird monitoring activities. They're measuring trees with tapes. They're doing landscape assessments with drones. They're consulting with community people. They're also consulting with researchers and academics who help us within our strategy of how to actually restore natural spaces. We have a recreation and tourism program, and we have two main recreational sites. We operate the Hollywell recreational area, and we also operate the Blue Mountain Peak tours, as well as Portland Gap accommodations. This area is kind of twofold. Of course, we use it to drive revenue, and all the funds that we raise through tourism, it goes directly back into conservation activities. So it's a nonprofit. We're using all the funds to ensure that nature and culture is protected. But also, we want to provide recreational opportunities for people. We want people to build environmental connection. We want people to have these outdoor mountain experiences, and we want them to connect with nature. So that's why we have these spaces for people to learn and start to care about the environment. We have a robust education and sustainable livelihoods program that tackles a lot of outreach activities. So we'll do a lot of training and workshops within communities. I know most recently, maybe at the beginning of this year or late last year, we had a training here in Charlestown, and a number of people were certified as tour guides, including some young people. Yes, very good, very good. So I'm happy to support that initiative within the space here. So what we're actually trying to do with this alternative livelihoods program is to not only tell people that cutting down the tree is bad and poisoning the stream is bad, but we want to encourage them to do something that is more environmentally sustainable. And not only encouragement, but we want to build the capacity for them to participate. So tourism is one of these areas that we have identified that the local communities have a lot of natural capital and cultural capital that can be used to preserve nature and preserve culture, as well as bring sustainable development within communities. So we've been training people over many years now, and I think the most recent thrust in the last 3 years, we have over 50 people across communities certified and trained in tour guide and tourism practitioners. So that's really something to be proud of. I'm happy with these communities. So I touched on some of the relevant activities and some of the relevant programs and so on. I'm just talking briefly about tourism as a tool for preservation of culture. So I started to explain just now, some of the project activities, and I wanted to detail the most recent one. So I know that the Charlestown group can also boast of being a grantee recipient from the Inter-American Foundation a couple of years ago, was it? Right? And following on that work, we had engaged other Maroon communities. So these are communities like Moortown, Windsor, Hayfield, a lot of them in the Rio Grande Valley, Scotts Hall. And we wanted to, as I said before, improve the capacity for participating in sustainable community tourism. And under this program, we've been able to achieve a number of goals in terms of improving the capacity, not only in tourism activities, but the organizational capacity of the various groups, their business management capacity, and being able to effectively present a high quality tourism product. It's not just about tourism, it's not just about providing a good time for visitors, but what we're doing is incorporating culture into the products as well. We're giving the communities opportunities to share their culture, their history with visitors. So all of these tours have a very core cultural and community component to the product where visitors are able to learn a lot about the various things. Um, so I'm pretty close to the end. I'm just about there. Just wanted to share a little bit more about our education and outreach activities with some tangible examples. We invest a lot in the kind of trainings and the outreach and so on, but we've also been moving around the various communities within the buffer zone, and we've been sharing posters like these about endemic birds and highlighting the importance of conservation of these animals. We have with us, yeah, man, we have a lot more. So we have a lot more, and we're donating quite a bit to the Charlestown group today. Colonel, how many you need? Give me a number.
Well, at times we have over 40 children here within the Saturday class, but since we are having a community day on Saturday, we'll still take the same amount.
All right, same amount. All right, so we have over 40 children. We recognize that we have a wider community and a lot of people in need of environmental education, right? So I'm pleased to announce that we have donated today 100 copies of the Don't Hurt That Bird publication produced by Dr. Amina Blackwood Meeks. This is a children's publication for bird conservation. Really great book. And we have some other smaller publications produced by the JCDT introducing children to maroon heritage and the Blue and Jonker Mountains. And the last thing is that we have another poster. We have Maybe we can do 50 of these, but in the meantime, we're going to ask for some help to pull this so I can show you what it looks like. Yeah. All right, so what we want is for these things to feature prominently within the schools and the public spaces within the communities. And we're telling kids don't hurt the birds, you know? It's a simple message. So really appreciate you having me here today. I'm always excited to be here and enjoy the festivities. All right, take care. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much for your excellent presentation. We remember our dear friend Suzanne Otuakan, and she served this community. Is she still there? Is she still there?
Susan, so if you were at the last event this year last time, you would have learned that Susan moved on from the JCDT just about a year ago. I have been dubbed the new Susan, but I reject that title vehemently. My name is David Walters, and I am the executive director of the JCDT.
Oh, you present well. Thank you so much.
Don't look too frightened now. Too far? Oh, the mic. Okay, yeah. Much better? Okay, great. Don't look too frightened because I know you saw me watching you with my hands almost getting up there. So I know you mentioned in the protection of the Blue and Jonker Mountains, the culture and nature. And you asked the question regarding UNESCO. And my question is the only the only thing in the middle of those three things are the indigenous and tribal people. But wasn't hearing that because in the protection of indigenous and tribal people, that is how they're able to use their rights to protect the land and to protect what you now know as culture when it is our way of life.
Right.
So my question is, how can JCDT assist or if you can, or make recommendations as to how we can move ahead together with that. Because once you talk about the environment, you're talking about the earth peoples, you're talking about the indigenous people, you're talking about the tribal people, because we're the ones who, again, had to learn the way of the land in order for us to progress to where we are now. Thank you.
Yeah, so the question is, what can the organization do to assist in the protection of tribal and indigenous people? That's the question, yeah? Yeah. All right, so there are a number of gaps, I would put it, in the strategy of conservation managers that we're aware of and some things that we're trying to improve on. So we typically do our work through projects, fixed term projects like 3 years, 4 years. We get funds and we carry out a project. The most recent project that I alluded to has to do with sustainable tourism and protection of nature and that sort of a thing. What we've realized in executing that project is that while it's a good initiative, one of the things that we need to improve upon is actually the community consultation component. So, like moving around the diverse communities, connecting with the people, and first understanding what they're doing, what they're interested in, and how can we actually help. So that question that you're asking, I need to be here, I need to be in different places, asking those questions, so that we can put things together and put things strategically together to have the kind of outcomes that you're interested in. What JCDT doesn't want to do is to be a single unilateral manager. We are collaborative in nature, and what we're trying to do is achieve ecosystem goals as well as social goals with the collaboration of the people on the ground. So it's not my decision to make to say, yeah, we're going to do this, that, and that to fix a problem. I'm going to come and ask you, what do we need to do? Yeah.
It's because nothing without us, nothing about us without us, because we're the ones who hold the knowledge for the spaces that we are inhabiting, the fauna, the animals, everything. Thank you so much for that.
Definitely. And thanks for raising that point. It's a very, very important one that's often overlooked. And as I work with the organization and with other organizations as well, we are trying to improve. And I want to use the right words here. Sometimes people who look like me in suits and so on, they come around and they say they're doing community consultation. What this tends to mean is that we have a plan and we're going to come and tell you what we're going to do, and you have a chance to say you don't like it or you like it, and I'm gonna go back and ignore you and not make any changes. That's typically what happens.
Excuse me, brother. The sound quality has gone down so much now.
Okay, not
You're
hearing so well.
with it, but the volume or something, because what you're saying is interesting.
Right. Are
So
you hearing me? Are you hearing me a little better?
yes, help it hearing better.
Okay, right. So what we're striving to do is actually increase the participation, right, and make it true participation, collaborative management of natural spaces. I see a hand here by Dr. Goff. I hope I'm not in trouble. Please, please, please go ahead, Dr. Goff.
Yes, yes. So, Altus, thank you so much for that presentation. Is one word I already mentioned, which I really wanted to know more about, and it's the co-management. I said co-management because we've been exploring a co-management model, with the environment generally. Often, government likes to manage without proper inclusion of the local communities. So I want to know more about that co-management agreement. So it's something we want to explore with the beaches around the island, and so I'd love to hear more about what are the context and the parameters of that co-management agreement.
Sure, sure, sure. So the co-management agreement is an agreement between the Natural Resources Conservation Authority that sits within NEPA and the Jamaica Conservation Development Trust. Um, and this allows JCDT to manage the space and carry out management activities. It empowers our rangers to do certain things in terms of management and actions that can be taken, but it also sets out some terms and obligations of each party within the agreement. So, for example, JCDT is mandated to present an annual work plan for review and approval. The work plan sets out how many patrols that we're going to do, what are the activities that we're going to take part in within communities, what are our focuses for the calendar period. And on the flip side of it, the authority, which is the NRCA, they have an obligation to do a number of things. One is to respond to reports of environmental breaches. They are obligated to provide financial support within each period, and it's usually a year. And they do water quality testing for the JCDT. So our rangers move around and sample the different freshwater resources within the national park. We send it to the NEPA lab and they test it for us and we share the results, and that helps us to manage. The co-management agreement typically lasts, I think it's 5 years, and we renew after 5 years. But within that arrangement, we have regular meetings, quarterly meetings, and it can be raised if the agreement needs to be amended. If there's anything that we're uncomfortable or we find is not working well, we have the opportunity to raise it and ask for changes to the co-management agreement. So that's at a high level what the co-management agreement looks like. We can have a more detailed conversation off here in terms of the details of what it is. And you can even look at it as an example. One more question, yeah.
So, Mr. Walters, okay, Mr. Walters, first, I really appreciate the sharing you're doing. You have really taken up that mantle from Susan Otuakan and been carrying it in a very good way. What I would like to share, my comment, instead of making it a question, is I represent the Jamaican hummingbird Taino people as Cacique and Mark Dualty here, Chieftainess. And we're not asking, we are saying here publicly that we are offering our support in the conservation work that JCDT is doing. So as a result, we can help to inform the things that you have to give to the children. Every bird on that, I can tell you an indigenous Taino name for the birds. I can tell you stories about those so that it is work that we can collaborate on together to anchor what she was saying about the indigenous people and indigenous culture. So when this story continues in other spaces, you can say the Tainos and Maroons were the first people to take care of these spaces. So thank you.
I appreciate that so much. Yeah, man.
Preach,
Thank you so much.
Cacique. Preach. Excellent.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody. Take care. Oh, wait, there's more? There's another question, all right?
I was around when the designation was made, what? 2014, 2015, 16?
2015.
Right, and by now I would have seen millions and millions of tourists coming to the Blue and John Crow Mountains.
Many, yes.
And you mentioned it. Who should be driving tourism in this region based on the designation, cultural, indigenous, and all these other factors?
Sure.
I am yet to see bus loads. They come to Charleston and they stop Brap, and that's it.
Yeah, so it's a collaborative effort. The World Heritage actually sits within the Ministry of Culture, and we have regular meetings with them to work on the strategy for tourism. One of the gaps is that we need to work a little bit more closely with the Ministry of Tourism themselves to promote and push tourism in the area. I have been in dialogue with the Ministry of Tourism recently, and they've been working on a community tourism policy. And I think they've produced some documentation for St. Thomas. And they had some consultation here recently. I don't know if it was here, to be honest, but I know Portland was included in the consultation as they work on the policy guidelines and the promotion of community tourism. Definitely. So one of the gaps I want to address as well is just the information flow so that the communities can be aware of what's happening and what the efforts are as we work to preserve the space. All right.
Yeah, the question I'm asking, have you all been working with Diana McIntyre Pike from the community?
Right. Diana,
just as businesses.
Diana is a long-term supporter and friend of JCDT and the Blue and John Crow Mountains. I know Diana is a long-term friend and supporter of JCDT and the Blue and John Crow Mountains, and I know that some work had been done in the past, long before my time. I have recently reconnected with Diana, so I spoke with her just late last year. We've been having conversations, and we're looking to see how we can collaborate a little bit better. All right? And there's another question.
Okay, so following behind Cacique Kalam, we have a little space in the grill. It's called the Temple of Inner Peace, and it's a peace retreat. And our patron is Dr. Chinzira Kahina. She's behind me, Queen Mother. And what we're thinking is that we can be a space. We have lots of birds, and we'd like to bring our friends there and have your posters and have you even present there or whatever to our groups.
Sure. Yeah.
So would be a resource to you.
We're open to collaboration, and we want to work with as many supporters as we have hands to collaborate with. So let's connect, let's share contacts, and we are working on producing some more materials for distribution, and we'll keep in touch. We definitely can move mountains together. Thank you so much. All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walters. We truly do appreciate your sharing and the work being done. I'll say that the surprise Mr. Walters gave us is those type of surprises we like, One thing on the paper, I'm saying, no, I'm not giving none of this. I'm giving you something completely different. plus posters, plus books.
He came prepared.
Exactly.
He knew what was gonna happen. He came prepared.
I love that. So a round of applause again for Mr. Walters and the work of JCDT. I mean, a lot of time, I said it about Susan before, and we'll say it about David and those who take up that mantle, that the work that these allies do normally goes unsung, right? Our ancestors were on the shoulders of our ancestors who are lifting us up. And we have these supporters. There is work that our ancestors have done to create these connections and these communities that help to push us forward. So we give thanks.
And
the
now,
chieftainess,
yes,
you can introduce
you
the
know,
main.
I started talking since I came in, and I really did not introduce myself. I just jump up and take over Kim business, Colonel Douglas business, and then just start to talk. So officially, Mabrika, Mabrika.
Mabrika! Mabrika!
Ahom. Thank you. Kaiko Tekina, Daka, Kasike Yani, Yamewani Taina peoples. Now, just wanted to ask one question. Is it okay for me to speak a different language, a foreign language? Then I will speak English. That's not my language. That's not my language. Exactly. And so we move into the final presentation for tonight. Colonel Douglas is the only one that can really bring home and tie together everything that has been going on from what time this morning? 9? 9? Okay. So challenges included, and none of you felt it, which means that as a chieftainess in our own right, as a colonel in our own right, you're looking at the mother of Charlestown Maroon community. And so I hand over to Colonel Douglas to take it home.
Thank you, Kasikana. And thank you, Kasi. It is only right for me to say I have been in good company. You know, you sat through the presentation, you contribute to the questions to let people understand more about the presentation that was done. So, of course, this presentation that I'm going to do, I've done it in St. Vincent. It was just running in Canada. And I decided that, hey, Charleston, I've seen it yet. So we are going to do it here in our own conference. So this was a presentation that was done in St. Vincent. It's the Land and Environmental Protection and Sustainability Management. Of course, I have already been greeting you from morning, so I greet you again. All right? So this tells you about us, the Charleston Maroons, and the communities in Jamaica. So it is one of the 5 Maroon community in Jamaica. We are the one that you get to without being going to it. So we are the only Maroon community in the lower part of Jamaica, right? So we are not in the hills. Now, this Maroon community was first in Old Crawford Town. Being in Old Crawford Town, after fighting the Maroon War using the Sambo Hill as their lookout point, they moved closer to the northern shoreline to settle. Today, the settlement, the new Crawford Town, is called Charlestown, and this is where we are today. Now, the Maroon, The Maroons of Charleston have many components. And so we have things such as the museum and other development. So I would like to preface my presentation with a quote, and it was written by the past leader of Charleston Maroons, the late Colonel Frank Lumsden. And it is a part of his welcome in the first edition of our conference festival, Maroon Festival magazine. It can be found on page 3, and of course the website is listed. So the Maroon become their continuing warfare, 85 years of armed conflict. They left no evidence or edifies as it is behind. So they use their colonial power and they left their value. They left trail along which you walk. They left trails along which you walk. You can hear the ancestor whispering. They left us they left us a culture with value to lives, and such value is making decision mindful of the next generation. It means we have to take care of the children. And each walk we walk or each decision we make, we'll hear a voice whispering to us, is it the right way? Don't you want to revisit? Take a look again. So those whispering sounds would be communicate. Celebrating our past, embracing our future. We are looking for what our ancestors did and what they left us. We are celebrating what they did and embrace the value that they left us. So what do we get? What are the values they leave us? They left us land. And from the land you get food, herbs, music, culture, art and craft, history. All that we can find within the land space. And so our theme and topic this year is the land, showcasing more of what we have done with what we got. With tourism in our mind, we have done the following. So we have created an attraction, which is this space, the Asafo Yard. Then we have the Charleston Maroons drummers and dancer as a group that will perform for you when you come here to the Asafo Yard or if you invite them out. We have homestay. Now, community homestay is where people stay when they come and visit. And they want to be a part of us, a family. They stay in the homes of family. We have art and craft. If you look on the outside, you can see various craft vendors or artisans with their craft. We have the annual Charleston Maroon Conference and Festival. So the annual International Charleston Maroon Conference and Festival. We have created that 16 years. So we have a hiking tour and maroon food. Okay. So why you want to go in my bag and pull out my string? Yes, I do wine, but they will hear that offline. All right. So, our attraction, the Asafo Yard. So we have the museum, we have a presentation area, we have the art and craft, the river and playing field, we have River Park and an office. That is what you'll find here. And so the centerpiece of the attraction is the museum, filled with artifacts, names, date, books, all the things you can find. And adding to that, we have the Learning Center. Next slide, please. Annual International Charleston Maroon Conference and Festival. As you can look at the slide, you can see the various areas that we're taking out. So the Charleston Maroon Conference and Festival continue to be a premier celebration and in indigeneity, Maroonage. And so the African and Taino culture is actually showcased during that period of time. So here in Charlestown, we talk about Ancestor Kwawu, how we had signed the peace treaty. The victory had led the Maroon to, and thus led us to Kwawu Day and Victory Day. So the conference and festival coming out of that are these areas, such as the workshop, the academic panel, and we have ancestral. We have ancestral day where we talk about Kwawu, so it's ancestral Kwawu Day. We have Maroon Victory Day. We have Wellness Village. We have Indigenous Movie Night, Bonfire, and what else? The Maroon Indigenous Women Circle. So those are some of the things coming out. The 16th Annual Charleston International Maroon Conference and Festival, it runs from June 20 to 23rd at the Ancestral Yaad, Charlestown, Portland, Jamaica. As we continue the discussion, you will agree that we are trying to use value that they left us and to us being used to help to embrace the future and that this event is following us, right? Wherever we go to. And so it would take I would take time out to thank the attendees of the conference and festival, whether via Zoom or in the presence of their Yaad, and also to thank our sponsors and partners. And so the Charleston Maroon drummers and dancers, we have developed drumming, singing, dancing group that toured Canada, France, Africa. This has developed into a performing Maroon lore, and of course, you can find us right here in Charleston when you need us for your event. We have performed once at the night market, hoping to go back again. So in closing, I must encourage everyone to ensure that their past helps someone in the future. And that as we go along throughout this conference, we take from there, we take a page, a line, a paragraph, a sentence, however you want to take it, to bring the children, young people, and other attendees or others who do not attend to the realization that our value comes from our ancestral value, the land that we have received. With that, I say, Medasi. And Medasi is thank you.
Medasi.
Me tell you, say, I escape, you know.
All right. So we thank you, Colonel Douglas, for that sharing on the work that has been done in Charlestown and continues to be done. You know, we cannot have a conference without mentioning Colonel Frank Lumsden, who, you know, a lot of this has been his vision, and we admire the work that you've done.
And this year marked the 10th year of the decriminalization of marijuana in this space with Colonel Frank Lumsden and Mark Golden.
All right. So there's a lot to celebrate, you know, legacy, passing on to the next generation. And Colonel Douglas has been carrying this in a very good way. So we checking on line if we have any questions, any comments, and if there's any here in the space. All right. Any here on the ground? Any
Not at this
comments?
moment. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So with that, of course.
Yeah, I must give thanks again, observing all protocols. Seeing, I find that Charlestown Maroon over the years have been such a welcoming community. Yeah, all of the just the people and the environment here that has been developed, and I personally representing Yaad Radio Charismatic Productions. You know, it's proud to be a part of even this international conference. You know, when I'm here seeing the presentations being put together, it's not just representing Jamaica, but we're looking at species from different islands. And that's what we're talking about. It's not just Jamaica, but we're talking about one Caribbean. We're talking about one African people. You know what I mean? So we give thanks for this space and for just the Charlestown Maroon community and its executive to plan such a wonderful event, well-rounded for both children to elders. Yeah? So give thanks. Yes, I.
All right. So with that, we give thanks for all of you who have participated, who have shared, who have been with us, who have contributed to the vision and the dreams of those who came before us. This, me not like Colonel Douglas, this academic panel feel different. I was a different about that one.
It's all us local people, people that used to they're one another. People that have the same inspiration, of course, heading the same topic, and you know the all the topic and theme they were flowing. They were just flowing. There was no itch. There was none that seems that it was not in the right place because it comes one after the other, and for that we give thanks.
All right. Yes, it was a powerful day. What question?
About the presentation, and it was just whether there is a component that I didn't hear about is the diaspora. Like, I mean, I know that one of the things that's really special about the Maroons is that they were migrant peoples, and they were always having to move as well for work reasons. And how do they relate back to the community? What is the links between the diaspora and does the town, does the community have any special institutions in that regard?
Colonel Douglas.
Oh, I didn't hear half of the question.
What about the diaspora?
Those overseas.
Like, what's their relationship to the community, and how does that factor into the visions that?
Well, the diaspora, I know they have a committee that some of us are included in. And so we meet on occasion. It depends on which one too, because there are more than one of them. So we meet on some occasion or so on, or sometimes if they have info, they would send it, or we have info, we'd send it. But I think meeting needed to be stronger so that you can know exactly what they are thinking. Yes, they are thinking back home, but what are the development plans for back home? And so that's where we are. We want to ensure that whatever plan it is, it's not about just going out there and putting something out there. It's about building a foundation that tomorrow, if we are not in the path, then the next person in line are taking that footstep can manage. And so the diaspora will take all the communities from around the Caribbean or the African continent there, and so that we can understand more, we can share more, and put development to plan.
All right, thank you.
Coming this late. So you weren't. I don't know where he went. Where did he go? Thank you. Thank you for that question, because the diaspora portion is happening, and what Colonel Douglas has shared, what Kasike Kalan has shared, what each of the presenters shared from this morning to now has been like a culmination of how that's being done. So whether it's happening through various United Nations organizations, CARICOM, African Union, European Union, etc., there's a whole initiative to really navigate how best to facilitate what's happening here in Jamaica, yes, and support. How did the Empress say? Nothing about us without us. And see, that goes for just about all of us that speak of that African, indigenous, ancestral kind of vibration, yeah? And I just think it's important to know that some of that, if you go back to some of the footage from this morning, you'll be able to hear a person speaking specifically of the different elements in the diaspora. And my closing comment is just that inside of the African continent, there is I'm going to say it twice, reconnection between Africa and the entire Caribbean Americas. I want to say that again. Africa, that's one of the reasons I'm sitting here for the day with a Pocomo shawl around me, because His Majesty King Makarani is, as we speak, working on repatriation of African belongings and is tying it to what is being done here in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, throughout the globe, yeah? So that diaspora piece, it's happening. And just, I'm sorry you didn't hear that beginning part. And I think that what Colonel Douglas and others have shared has highlighted that. And I'm hoping that we actually, I'm going to say what I said earlier, heal heritage education, arts legacy, because I saw all of that listed here, so that we can move this forward, yeah? Give thanks and praise. Mabrika! I'm feeling that.
All right, hold on.
All right, so before Kasike closes this session, I just want to say a big thank you. I want to thank you on behalf of the Charleston Maroon Council for being here. You were here from morning, it's now night. And I want to thank the persons in their Suffolk Yard. And I also want to specially thank Dr. Anthony Richards. You could have left us, but you've been here from morning. We want to say thank you. And thank you to everyone else that came out to make it possible.
So I will not close, because in some traditions, when we greet like this, we don't close the space. We allow each person to leave with a part of it with them, and when we connect again, we reconnect, right? So we're going to have a little song. For those who weren't here yesterday, is a call and response song. All right? So when I start, you repeat. All right. Bomatom, Atabe, Busika, Areitu, Bomatom, Atabe, Busika, Areitu, Bomatom. Good, good. Bomatum, 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 Yukahu, Busika, Areito, Bomatum, Yukahu, Busika, Areito, Bomatum, Bomatum, Bomatum. Bomatum. Last one now. Bomatum. Charlestown. Bosika. Areitum. Bomatum. Charlestown. Bosika. Areitum. Bomatum. 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 And Hankatu. And so it is. Thank you all. Have a good night.
What a day. What a day. Thank you, people. Thank you all.
Thank you. Special.
Recording stopped. Thank you.
All right, recording stopped. Nice. Mark, stop.
Yes, but yes, sir.
Thank you for arranging everything for us to come out. Remote was nice. It was nice to be part of it. Right?
Yes, man. I'm sorry for the timing, but I really feel we did a good job today. And I thank you.
You all did a good job. And it allowed, other participants to come in from different places. It's like, in terms of the people who came through, there were as many online as a focus.
Yes.
It was very good. So you were traveling? You're traveling?
No, I'm back now. Yes.
Never sell out. You reach back in Jamaica?
Yes, just this afternoon, yeah.
Excellent. Well, the Kaseki some of my also landed.
Yes, we travel together, yeah.
Refuge in nature to come applaud.
Yes, man, 1 second.
Are you going to have medical proceedings? Maybe even
As what?
Are you going to have?
Never sell out. She wants quark and culture, telling them not to sign. Open your eyes. She said the treaty. It's a trickery to conquer, rule and divide. Yes, conquer, rule and divide. She said, brothers, oh my brothers, can you read between them lines? Open your eyes. She said it's best to unite. Amongst ourselves, don't fight. So she never sell out. Nothing never sell out. We nothing never sell out. Ashanti Bushi Konde Queen of sell out. Never sell out.
Nam kum kum sassy. The woman there, oh, the woman there.